Imagine this. You're standing alone in a vast white room. There are no doors, no windows, only mirrors. Tall, endless mirrors, surrounding you from every angle. But there's a catch. None of them reflect who you really are. Each mirror shows a different version of you. In one, you're smiling confidently in a luxury car. In another, you're radiant in flawless skin and designer clothes. One shows you holding a trophy, another has you surrounded by likes, followers, and blue check marks. You start searching for the mirror that shows your real face, your fears, your flaws, your raw thoughts, your private joys, but you can't find it. Now imagine you've spent your whole life in that room. Who are you? And more disturbingly, who decided what these mirrors should show? What if the identity you call your own, the music you like, the career you chase, the body you inhabit, the morals you preach, isn't really yours at all? What if it's been curated, sold to you in fragments, assembled by algorithms, polished by advertisements, and approved by social consensus before you even had a chance to question it? What if capitalism didn't just sell you products, it sold you yourself? You live in a time where the idea of being your authentic self is a sacred mantra. You're told to be original, to speak your truth, to build a personal brand that screams you. But pause for a moment. Who taught you what you should look like? Since the first time you opened your eyes to a screen, you've been under surveillance by the most sophisticated psychological apparatus ever built. Not to imprison you, but to shape you. Not to take your freedom, but to redefine it. Because here's the paradox no one wants to talk about. You believe you are free, yet every version of you that you've explored has been constructed within a system designed to profit off your choices. Even your rebellion, your quirks, your tattoos, your gender identity, your political rage, your spirituality, your trauma, it can all be monetized, categorized, sold. Every preference you claim is filtered through an economic lens. What does it signal? What does it cost? How does it sell? Think about the last big decision you made. Did you want that car, that career, that body, or were you told to want it so many times it began to feel like your own voice? Where does influence end and identity begin? Capitalism's genius isn't in making you consume. It's in making you believe that what you consume defines who you are. It's no longer just about buying shoes. It's about being the kind of person who wears those shoes. You don't just buy coffee, you align with an aesthetic, a tribe, a value system. You don't just get a phone, you buy status, culture, belonging. But the deeper truth is even more unsettling. You were never asked who you are. You were asked what you like. And from there, your sense of self was reverse engineered. You chose between option A and option B, and capitalism nodded in approval. Good consumer. Good identity. But did you ever consider option Z? The option that wasn't profitable? The version of yourself that isn't algorithmically viable, isn't optimized for virality, isn't marketable? That version of you, the one beneath the layers, is dangerous. Not to you, but to the system. Because if you saw it, if you became it, you might stop buying. You might stop conforming. You might stop trying to be seen and start being real. And then the mirrors would crack. So here's the great, terrifying question. What if the person you believe yourself to be is the most successful product capitalism ever created? What if you've mistaken customization for freedom, branding for authenticity, and consumption for identity? What if your true self has been hijacked, not by force, but by seduction? We often think of enslavement as chains and cages. But the most effective prison is the one that feels like a choice. And that's the brilliance of it. You were never told what to be. You were simply offered 1,000 glossy, seductive versions of you, and made to believe you chose freely. Meanwhile, your desires were shaped by forces you couldn't see, and your image of selfhood was slowly welded to your economic role. Your identity has become the ultimate commodity. Curated. Branded. Sold. Not just to others, but to yourself. So now the question lingers in the air, pulsing with quiet urgency. If capitalism has hijacked your identity, can you ever truly know who you are? Or are you only ever peeling back layers of illusion, hoping one day to find a face that was never yours to begin with? You've started to feel it now, that strange dissonance between who you think you are and who you actually might be. Like waking from a dream where you played the starring role, only to realize someone else wrote the script. But the question that now claws at the edge of your consciousness is, why? Why would something as abstract as an economic system care about your identity? And how did we get here? To answer that, we have to go beneath the surface, deep beneath, into the folds of human psychology, into the philosophical machinery of selfhood, and into the ancient hunger that capitalism feeds with clinical precision. Let's begin with a truth few are willing to admit. You don't start with a solid self. You begin as a void. Carl Jung called this the unconscious, a churning sea of archetypes, instincts, shadows, and forgotten wounds. You are born incomplete, full of raw potential but lacking direction. Your ego, the self you know, is not something you're born with. It's assembled, constructed slowly over time through experience, imitation, reward, and rejection. From your first steps, you are bombarded with symbols and signals telling you what is good, what is cool, what is worthy. You absorb them before you even have the language to resist. You laugh when others laugh, cry when others frown. This is how humans survive. We mirror. But mirroring has a dark side. If you never step outside the reflection, you become the mirror. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his searing exploration of individual will, warned that without awareness, humans fall into what he called the herd morality, a life lived according to the values of the crowd, not the voice within. He saw society, especially modern industrial society, as a machine that molds people into predictable units, stripping them of the unique potential to become the Übermensch, the self-created individual. But in today's world, this molding doesn't come from priests or kings. It comes from brands, algorithms, and the digital gaze. Imagine Viktor Frankl, Holocaust survivor and author of Man's Search for Meaning, standing in the ruins of human suffering, proclaiming that even in the darkest despair, man retains the freedom to choose his attitude. What would he say now, if he saw millions of people so numbed by endless consumption and distraction that they've lost even the question of meaning? He might say this: the danger today is not oppression, it is anesthesia. The self is not being crushed by violence, it's being lulled into oblivion by comfort. And who orchestrates that comfort? Capitalism, not as a villain in a smoky boardroom, but as a system driven by a simple algorithm: maximize profit. To do that, it needs one thing above all else: predictable desires. Now enter Arthur Schopenhauer, who believed that human existence was ruled by an insatiable will, a blind, irrational force that keeps us chasing, wanting, hungering. He claimed that suffering was inherent to life because the will can never be satisfied. Capitalism took this insight and found a goldmine in it. If humans are endless wells of desire, why not keep them wanting forever? Not to satisfy them, but to sell them their own longing. So here's the hidden structure. Capitalism doesn't manufacture products. It manufactures cells who will crave those products. It doesn't ask, "What do you need?" It whispers, "Who do you want to be?" And then hands you a price tag. Aldous Huxley saw this coming in Brave New World. He envisioned a society not ruled by tyranny, but by pleasure. A society that no longer asked if people were free, because they were too sedated by entertainment, stimulation, and dopamine to even think about it. A world in which freedom was no longer relevant, because nobody missed it. And this brings us to perhaps the most dangerous idea of all. Jean-Paul Sartre said, "Existence precedes essence." That is, you are not born with a pre-written identity. You become who you are through your actions, your choices, your confrontation with nothingness. For Sartre, this was terrifying and liberating. You are responsible for your own meaning. But in the capitalist world, that freedom becomes a liability. Freedom is inefficient. It questions. It disrupts. It stops buying. So instead, capitalism offers you essence without effort. It says, "Here. Be this. Wear this. Vote this way. Post this meme. Follow this influencer. Buy this identity. It gives you the illusion of Sartre's freedom. Choose your lifestyle, your label, your brand of rebellion, but all within a controlled marketplace of pre-approved selves. A prison made of glass, where every option feels like freedom because you picked it, even if all the choices were placed there by someone else. And we've internalized it. You now look at your life and ask, how do I look? How many followers do I have? Am I on trend? Is this outfit me? Should I post this? Will they like it? Do I belong? These aren't superficial questions. They are the quiet echo of a deeper truth. You've been taught to see your selfhood as a performance. And performances must be approved, monetized, liked. The root of the problem isn't that you buy things. It's that you no longer know why you want them, or even who is doing the wanting. Your psyche has been colonized. The soil of your desire has been tilled and seeded by invisible hands. You are no longer a self. You are a consumer of selves. And this quiet theft of your interiority, your freedom to be undefined, unbranded, unoptimized, is the most profound tragedy of all. But it's not irreversible. To break free, you must first recognize the cage. And now, you've seen its bars. You've seen the cage. The walls are made of taste, aesthetics, curated personalities, and branded dreams. But the truly insidious thing about this prison is not just that it's invisible, it's that it feels like freedom. You smile in your selfies. You choose your style. You speak in your own voice, or so you think. But now we go deeper, past the mirrors and curated selves, into the quiet corners of your mind where the consequences of identity manipulation sink their roots. Not loudly. Not all at once. But subtly. Irreversibly. Let's start with the truth you felt but maybe never named. You are exhausted. And you don't fully know why. You wake up, scroll, compare. You perform. You optimize. You brand. You track your engagement. You worry you're falling behind. You post your highlights. You curate your pain. You consume not just products, but people, influencers, aesthetics, ideologies, bodies. You are never allowed to just be. You must be something. Always. And it must be something valuable. Capitalism doesn't need you to have an identity that makes sense. It only needs one that produces metrics. You were not designed for this. Your nervous system, millennia in the making, was tuned for survival in nature, not competition in digital arenas. You're trying to be seen by everyone and no one at the same time. And it's shattering your psyche. Neurologically, we are wired for coherence. The brain wants your identity to feel whole. It uses stories, memories, and associations to maintain the illusion of a unified self. But capitalism slices that self into fragments, one for Instagram, one for work, one for family, one for dating apps, one for job interviews. Each self has its own dress code, language, emotional palette. This fragmentation is not neutral, it's exhausting. Your subconscious mind is constantly managing the discrepancies. This leads to what psychologists call ego fatigue, the depletion of mental energy that results from constantly switching roles and suppressing parts of yourself. And when the exhaustion hits, what do you reach for? Another product. Another scroll. Another brand promising clarity, beauty, peace. Capitalism sells you the poison and the cure in the same breath. Let's look at the emotional toll. Anxiety, for instance, is no longer just a clinical condition, it's a business model. Platforms are designed to trigger your insecurities, then sell you solutions. Want to feel more confident? Buy this course. Want to be more attractive? Follow this skincare influencer. Want peace? Subscribe to this mindfulness app. But none of it resolves the core issue, that your sense of self has become a moving target, one you are constantly forced to chase and never allowed to catch. And what of your relationships? When your identity is a product, other people become consumers. You date not to connect, but to be chosen. You speak not to share truth, but to gain approval. You craft your presence to be likable, retweetable, desirable. But real intimacy demands vulnerability, not branding. And that kind of intimacy becomes terrifying when you've spent years hiding behind performance. Friendships become metrics. Love becomes content. Vulnerability becomes a strategy. This is not connection. This is market exchange dressed as human interaction. Now expand that lens. Look at society as a whole. When everyone is trying to optimize themselves for attention, something horrifying begins to happen. Authenticity becomes indistinguishable from strategy. You see someone crying online, do they mean it? Or is it branding? Someone shares a political opinion, are they sincere? Or just aligning with their audience? When identity is monetized, sincerity begins to rot. Truth, too, becomes a casualty. Not because people are lying, but because truth becomes less profitable than performance. Outrage becomes content. Nuance becomes a threat. The algorithm rewards extremity, tribalism, certainty. You're not being informed, you're being addicted. You consume not knowledge, but identity reinforcement. Your beliefs are no longer explored, they're shopped for. This is where cognitive biases deepen the trap. Take confirmation bias, your tendency to favor information that supports what you already believe. Capitalism weaponizes this. It feeds you endless versions of your chosen identity. Like books? Here's a niche aesthetic for that. Political? Here's your echo chamber. Spiritual? Here's a $300 crystal subscription. Each click sharpens your algorithmic profile. Each post you like becomes part of a vast psychological sketch. And the more you engage, the more tightly you're boxed in, not just digitally, but existentially. What begins as preference becomes ideology. What begins as taste becomes tribalism. You become less curious, less fluid, less capable of transformation, because your identity has become an investment. And investments must be defended. Now reflect on this. When was the last time you truly changed your mind? Not just refined it, but shattered it, rebuilt it, became someone new? And did that transformation happen because of capitalism, or in spite of it? Because capitalism doesn't want you to evolve. It wants you to upgrade. To rebrand. To pivot your image while keeping your consumption intact. Even your suffering is co-opted. Trauma becomes aesthetic. Mental illness becomes trend. Depression becomes an opportunity for engagement. You're encouraged to talk about your struggles as long as it's digestible, monetizable, and on brand. Not healing, but exposure. Not support, but visibility. You're told to be vulnerable, but only in ways that won't alienate your audience. You're told to be real, but only if real is beautiful. You're told to be you, but only if you can sell. This is not freedom. This is theater. And the cost is staggering, not in dollars, but in your soul. Because here's the final, brutal twist. The more identities you try on, the less you remember what it felt like to simply exist. The consequences are not always loud. Sometimes they're just a quiet numbness. A subtle sense that something is missing. A gnawing feeling that no matter what you buy, follow, or become, you are not quite home. That's not your fault. It's the cost of a system that profits not when you are whole, but when you are endlessly searching. But what if you stopped searching? What if you stopped buying yourself in pieces? You've seen the machine. You felt it working its fingers beneath your skin, shaping your desires, selling you reflections of yourself. And now, maybe for the first time, you've stopped, stood still in the blinding light of truth, and asked, what if none of this is me? Good. That stillness is the beginning of rebellion. Because the only kind of rebellion that matters now isn't loud. It isn't performative. It doesn't require a manifesto or a million likes. It begins in silence. And it begins inside. Let's be clear, this isn't a call to burn it all down. That's what the machine wants you to believe rebellion looks like, dramatic, external, self-destructive. Because if it can convince you to revolt in ways that are loud and futile, it keeps you in its orbit. It gives you a role to play. The edgy one. The outsider. The nonconformist. Capitalism loves rebels, it sells them better than anyone. Just ask James Dean, or that luxury streetwear brand marketed as anti-establishment while profiting millions off teenagers who believe that buying rebellion is the same as being free. But true rebellion doesn't sell. It subtracts. You want to break free? Start by subtracting. Subtract the performance. The carefully staged posts. The endless updates. The curated opinions. What happens when you stop trying to be seen? What happens when you stop feeding the algorithm your soul? Sit with the answer. It might terrify you. Because the first stage of freedom feels like emptiness. When you strip away the identities you've worn like masks, when you stop chasing validation like a drug, when you unplug from the rituals of digital self-affirmation, you'll encounter silence. A raw, eerie silence that asks, "Who am I now?" Most people run from that question. But the ones who stay, they find something holy. Let's look back. The world has known these rebels before. People who stepped out of the capitalist dream, not because they hated it, but because they saw through it. Think of Henry David Thoreau, retreating to a cabin at Walden Pond, not to escape society, but to strip away its illusions. He wrote, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." That was in 1854. He had no Instagram, no corporate influencers. Yet he already saw the trap, the performance of life without the experience of living. Or consider Diogenes, the ancient Greek philosopher who rejected status, wealth, and power. He lived in a barrel, mocked emperors, and carried a lantern through the streets of Athens in broad daylight, claiming to be looking for an honest man. He was ridiculed, and yet, even Alexander the Great once said, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Why? Because Diogenes was free, unowned, unbranded, whole. Modern rebellion doesn't require a barrel or a pond. It requires attention, the kind of ruthless attention to your inner world that capitalism cannot commodify. It requires a shift from performance to presence. You stop scrolling. You stop comparing. You start noticing. What actually brings you joy? Not pleasure. Not distraction. Not momentary highs. Joy. The kind that needs no audience. The kind that's incompatible with branding. You begin to explore a strange new possibility. That your value is not something to prove. It's something to feel. This is where Viktor Frankl re-enters the conversation. In the midst of unspeakable suffering, he discovered that the one freedom no one can take from you is the freedom to choose your attitude, your response to the world. But more than that, he realized something revolutionary, that man's deepest need is not happiness, or status, or comfort, it is meaning. And meaning doesn't come from consumption. It comes from creation. From choosing who you are when no one is watching. From showing up for something larger than yourself. So, how do you rebel? You create. Not for likes. Not for profit. Not for branding. But for the sheer act of expressing what capitalism cannot contain, your soul. Paint. Write. Sing. Dance. Garden. Build. Speak truth. Create beauty. Love deeply. Ask questions no algorithm can answer. Do it even if no one sees it. Especially then. You also rebel by connecting. Not networking. Not transactional exchange. But connection that is slow, human, unpolished. Friendship that isn't for show. Intimacy that isn't filtered. You reclaim your body. Not as a product to be displayed, but as a living, breathing miracle. You move because it feels good, not because your smartwatch told you to. You eat not to look a certain way, but to nourish your sacred, embodied self. You reclaim time. You learn to be bored. You resist the demand for constant stimulation. You let your mind wander. You let your thoughts breathe. And slowly, something shifts. You begin to remember what it felt like to just exist. To be human. Not an identity. Not a brand. Not a content machine. You will feel alone sometimes. The system will whisper, "You're falling behind." You will be tempted to return to the scrolling, the selling, the branding. But hold steady. Because the true self is not loud. It's quiet. Like a seed breaking open underground. Like a soul unlearning its training. Like a rebel who chooses peace over performance. Eventually, the anxiety begins to fade. The comparisons lose their grip. Your nervous system softens. You no longer feel the need to be everything, all at once, for everyone. You become someone far more dangerous to the system. Someone content. Not complacent. Not numbed. But grounded. Whole. Free. This is rebellion in its purest form. Not with fists raised, but with a soul intact. There is a moment, if you're quiet enough, still enough, when the noise fades. Not just the external noise. The buzz of notifications, the hum of advertisements, the soft pull of the marketplace calling your name. But the internal noise too. The voice inside you that whispers you are not enough. That your value is conditional. That your existence is a project, and your worth must be earned. And in that moment of silence, something terrifying and beautiful happens. You begin to hear yourself again. Not the self they sold you. Not the one stitched together from social feedback and capitalist approval. But the original self. The one before language. Before labels. Before mirrors. And you realize the ultimate truth. You were never missing. You were only buried. Buried under layers of identities designed not to set you free, but to keep you productive. To keep you consuming. To keep you predictable. The system didn't steal your soul. It convinced you to abandon it. It made you believe you needed an image more than you needed a self. That being loved was more important than being whole. That freedom was the ability to choose between 100 cages, each one more aesthetically pleasing than the last. But here's the paradox. You are not a brand. You are not a role. You are not a mirror of the culture. You are the blank space between identities. You are the silence beneath the noise. You are the awareness that watches it all unfold, the unnameable presence that existed before capitalism and will exist long after it. And this is where the machine breaks. Because capitalism cannot sell you what it cannot define. It cannot monetize what it cannot measure. It cannot own what it cannot name. So the greatest threat to the system isn't revolution. It isn't protest. It's awakening. When you remember who you are, the machine loses. It loses its grip on your desires. It loses its power over your choices. It loses its claim on your soul. Because you no longer need to be seen. You see yourself. You no longer need to perform worth. You embody it. You no longer search for meaning in the marketplace. You live it, daily, slowly, deliberately. And from that stillness, something sacred begins to grow. You become unbranded. You become dangerous. Not because you fight the system head-on, but because you refuse to be defined by it. You no longer chase what others worship. You no longer perform for eyes that do not see you. You no longer shape yourself to fit a world that profits from your confusion. Instead, you create. You connect. You become. This is the revolution. Not with flags. Not with noise. But with deep, quiet presence. You plant your feet in the ground of your own being and say, I remember. I remember what it means to be human. Not a user. Not a demographic. Not a market. Human. A flicker of the infinite. A question without an answer. A soul that cannot be packaged. And yes, the world will try to pull you back in. It will try to rename you, rebrand you, remake you. It will whisper, "Come back. We have a new version of you. It's shinier, more relevant. It will trend." But you'll see the lie now. You'll hear the trap in the seduction. And you'll smile, not out of cynicism, but because you've remembered the truth. You never needed to become anything. You only needed to return. Return to the you that cannot be sold. The you that exists beneath identity. The you that breathes without purpose, without profit, without permission. This is your original face, the one you had before the world told you who to be. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need performance. It doesn't even need a name. It simply is. And now, so are you. So take a breath. Let the performance fall away. Let the branding burn to ash. Let the image dissolve. And in the stillness that follows, feel it. Not the buzz of likes. Not the rush of validation. But the quiet, steady rhythm of truth. You are already whole. You are already free. You are already you. No mirrors required.